The golden light reflected through the exquisite crystal panels suspended from the soaring ceiling of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, New York. The scene that night was like stepping out of a classic 60s movie, a charity gala called Hope for Tomorrow, where the most powerful people in America gathered to join hands for the less fortunate children, the lives damaged by war and poverty. The splendid ballroom, where every step echoed like the rhythm of the music, full of charm. Hundreds of elegant gentlemen in perfectly tailored tuxedos, and ladies wearing evening gowns sparkling like stars. They raised their glasses of sparkling champagne, exchanged standard smiles, but everyone understood that behind those eyes were stories, calculations that not everyone could easily share. But amidst all that splendor, there was an appearance that almost no one expected: Barron Trump. At 18, he was tall and straight, like the young veterans that many people had seen at honor ceremonies. His light blonde hair was neatly cut. His deep blue eyes contained a quietness rarely seen in a young person, especially one born into such a powerful family. Barron did not sit in the center, nor did he appear with a bustling entourage like many other prestigious guests. He chose a table in the left corner of the auditorium, where the lights were dimmer, as if to blend into the darkness, avoiding the scrutiny of the crowd. Few people knew that he was invited by David Harrington, a longtime friend of the Trump family and also the head of the charity organization of tonight's gala. Mr. Harrington, at 62, still maintained the demeanor of a veteran, with a serious face but hidden kindness. And perhaps it was he who convinced Barron to step into the space that he had always wanted to avoid. The older audience will understand. The appearance of a president's son in public is not always easy, because wherever he goes, he will be scrutinized, compared, and even harshly judged just because of the name Trump he carries. If you love engaging, dramatic stories and thrilling cases, don't forget to subscribe to the channel today. Each video is a journey full of surprises, taking you into the world of unsolved mysteries. Join me in exploring, analyzing, and feeling every detail of the story. But tonight, people do not see an arrogant or haughty rich kid, but a young man trying to keep himself calm, like someone entering the adult world for the first time, but clearly understanding the pitfalls that lie ahead. The violin from the quartet gently resounded, as if leading everyone into another world, a beautiful but also fake world. Meanwhile, Barron sat quietly, occasionally turning to exchange a few soft words with Mr. Harrington, who sat next to him like a father, protecting his son from a sea of strangers. There were moments when Barron looked up. His eyes seemed to be carefully observing each guest, each look, each smile. Not with a judgmental attitude, but like someone listening to things that no one said. Inside the auditorium, prominent figures such as Eleanor Price, 56 years old, a social activist for children's rights, or Mark Delaney, 65 years old, director of the Hope for Tomorrow Foundation, were all busy discussing work and charity plans. But perhaps, if anyone paid close attention, they would notice the surprised and somewhat curious looks when they saw Barron there. No one knew the exact reason why he appeared, because few people had ever seen him at public events. When the MC began to introduce the prominent figures of the night, Barron's name was not mentioned, and perhaps that was what he wanted. But the eyes in the hall still began to look towards the corner of the table where he sat, like small waves spreading across the surface of a lake. People whispered, people talked, but he remained calm, sipping mineral water, not caring about his surroundings. Interestingly, if you pay attention, Barron carries with him a small notebook covered in dark brown leather. Perhaps few people know that he has a habit of writing down all his thoughts and feelings, a rare habit among young men living in today's social networking world. One of the impressive images of that night, a young man, no need to show off, no need to brag, simply present with all his calmness and inner strength. If the sparkling crystal lights on the ceiling are what create the external beauty of the gala, then the presence of Barron Trump is the quietest but most powerful light, making many people look back at themselves. Because at the age of 18, when his peers may be chasing the spotlight, competing for fame, Barron chose a hidden corner, chose silence. But it was that silence that prepared him for a moment later, when he was forced to step into the light and make the whole world listen. While the whispers about Barron Trump's surprise appearance had not yet subsided, the warm yellow lights in the lobby of the Ritz-Carlton suddenly dimmed, giving the main stage to one of the most anticipated characters of the night, Karen Ellsworth. Karen Ellsworth, 48 years old, is no stranger to those who love famous political debate shows on American television. She is known as a sharp pen with blunt, sometimes thorny arguments, and of course, has often been involved in heated debates. But that has made her audience, who love honest words to the bone, love and respect her. Tonight, Karen was invited, not only because of her speaking talent, but also because she represents a straightforward perspective on modern society. The organizers hope that she will bring a talk that awakens hearts that seem to be accustomed to flowery words at charity events like this. The host, with a slightly forced smile, stepped onto the stage and introduced, "Dear ladies and gentlemen, today we are very honored to have a veteran writer who always asks questions that make society rethink about itself. Please welcome Miss Karen Ellsworth." Applause broke out. But it was not the enthusiastic applause that is usually seen at luxurious gala events. It was a somewhat cautious applause, as if everyone was both waiting and fearing what was about to be said. Karen stepped onto the stage, wearing a shiny black suit, simple but powerful. Her sharp eyes swept across the audience. She smiled the kind of smile that everyone understood as prepare to listen. And then she began, "Thank you all for giving me a beautiful Saturday evening to dress up, drink champagne, and talk about charity." A soft laugh broke out. She said what everyone was thinking, but did not dare to say out loud. "I know you're all good people. I know you love the children you've never met. But let's be honest. When we go home, will any of us remember those lives? Or will we continue with the parties, the bloated bank accounts, the innocuous gossip?" The room suddenly became quiet. Some people laughed, but many began to frown. Karen was tapping into the hypocrisy that many of those who came here didn't want to admit. Then, in a monotone but powerful voice, she continued, "And then, how can we not mention America's most famous family, the Trumps? Whether you love them or hate them, we can't deny that they are an integral part of every conversation about power and social responsibility." Some laughed, but there were also glances at Barron Trump, who sat quietly in the back of the room. Karen paused, sipping her water, as if to let everyone digest what she had just said. Then, unexpectedly, she turned her attention to Barron. "And you know," she half smiled, half sarcastically, "it's interesting to have Barron Trump sitting here with us at an evening talking about children in need when he's never lacked for anything in his life." The air in the room seemed to freeze. A few people tried to smile, but most turned their heads to look at Barron, who was still sitting calmly, his hand lightly touching the glass of water, his eyes looking towards the stage without revealing any emotion. Karen continued, her voice suddenly softer but full of hidden meaning. "I wonder what will happen when someone born in a golden palace has to face the real world. Will he ever understand the pain of the children we are talking about tonight?" That question, although not directed, was like a thin but sharp blade, quietly cutting into the tense atmosphere. The elders in the audience, those who had experienced the ups and downs of life, looked at each other. Some were upset, some shook their heads, some quietly observed. Mr. David Harrington, who invited Barron, now clenched his hands on the arms of his chair, his eyes turned towards Karen full of warning. But Barron Trump was like an image that shocked many people and did not react at all. Not a frown, not a look of annoyance. He sat still, his face strangely calm, his eyes sharp as if analyzing every word Karen said. And it was that silence that made the audience more confused than ever. The older audience members must have understood that silence was not weakness. It was the stillness of someone who knew the storm was coming and was ready to face it. Karen, perhaps, also realized that she had crossed a line that she herself was not sure she was ready to face. Her voice trailed off as she finished. "But I guess tonight I'll leave you to think about that. We're here to talk about compassion, or at least to pretend that we have it." Karen finished her speech, stepping away from the podium, leaving behind a heavy room where the crystal chandeliers seemed to have stopped shining. All eyes turned to Barron Trump. and everyone knew that the night was not over. The answer to what Karen had just said would come. The magnificent room of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel was now covered in a thick fog of tension. The originally noisy, bustling sounds of the gala suddenly disappeared as if they had never existed. The eyes of nearly 300 powerful guests, people who seemed to be only familiar with stories about wealth, power, and politics, suddenly focused on a corner of the room where Barron Trump was sitting. Barron still did not move. Amidst the curious, judgmental, and even sympathetic eyes, he maintained a rare composure for an 18-year-old boy. Anyone there, especially the older audience who had experienced the ups and downs of life, could clearly feel one thing. Barron's silence was not fear. It was the silence of someone who knows too well the weight of every word, a surprising maturity that few expected him to be able to maintain when being made fun of in front of the whole hall. Journalist Karen Ellsworth was also somewhat uneasy at this moment. Originally a veteran of the stage, having argued with the most experienced politicians, but now she herself realized that she had accidentally touched a sacred thing that she had not anticipated: the self-esteem of a young person. The whole audience was silent. Some people pursed their lips, some shook their heads slightly, some looked down at their glasses as if to avoid eye contact, but everyone watched Barron. A few seconds passed like centuries, and then he stood up. Not in a hurry, not a single angry expression, just a simple gesture, but enough to make every heart stop for a beat. The mahogany chair made a gentle sound as it was pushed back. Barron slowly stood up straight, his pale blonde hair shining under the crystal lights. With his outstanding height and his straight figure like an oak tree in a storm, he walked towards the stage. A gap opened between the rows of tables, as if the room itself was making way for him. The old, the young, the wealthy businessmen, the movie stars, the powerful politicians all held their breath. The older gentlemen, those who had lived through the turbulent history of America, perhaps at that moment also saw in him the image of a young generation that today's society is hoping for, a generation that knows how to protect itself from public opinion. Barron stepped closer to the stage, not holding the microphone, not standing in the center of the light, just standing a few steps away, enough for everyone to clearly see his blue eyes, a pair of cold but deep eyes, as if carrying the many confidences of a young person who had to live under the heavy shadow of family and society. And then he spoke, softly but clearly enough for everyone to hear every word. "Thank you for letting me listen." No one expected him to start like that. An opening line that brought the room to a halt, a word of gratitude for the people who had just laughed at him. Then Barron continued, his eyes fixed on Karen, the reporter. "I grew up in the eyes of the world. People look at me and think they know me. But you don't know me, you don't know my story or what I face every day." A wave of emotion rippled through the rows of seats. The old man sitting by the window, with a white beard, nodded slightly. Maybe he understood. He knew what it was like to be judged by the outside without anyone bothering to ask what the person was like on the inside. Barron paused, then said, "We are here to help vulnerable children who need a hand outstretched with respect. But if we can't treat each other with respect in this room, what good is charity?" The room was dead silent. "I didn't come here to be pitied. I didn't come here to see someone use me as a joke. I came here because I believe that somewhere the children you want to help need to be respected as human beings, not as jokes at the dinner table." An elderly lady, wearing a navy blue lace dress, gently wiped away tears. Perhaps she was thinking of a grandchild, or of young people she had met through volunteer work. Barron raised his head, looking straight at Karen, who had just been so eloquently mocking him. "Words have power. They can hurt, but they can also heal. And tonight, I choose to let my words remind everyone of kindness." No one said a word. Those who were used to galas filled with empty compliments now realized that they had just witnessed a rare event. A young man daring to stand among a sea of older people, speaking the truth that everyone else avoided. Barron paused, then bowed his head slightly, as if to conclude. He turned and walked back to his seat, leaving behind an absolute silence of beating hearts, a silence of people questioning themselves. When Barron Trump quietly returned to his simple chair, the whole room was still immersed in a silence that perhaps no one had ever experienced at such a lavish gala. Not a laugh, not a whisper. Only his slow footsteps echoed through the vast hall, where the gorgeous dresses and neat tuxedos were no longer the center of attention. It was an 18-year-old boy who, with his silence and sincere words, made the room bow. Karen Ellsworth, who had stood there with a confident gaze less than 10 minutes ago, was now petrified by the response she had probably never received in her entire career. The familiar ironic smile on her lips was gone. Instead, there was surprise, a little regret, and most of all, embarrassment, something that a sharp journalist like her had never shown in public. Barron sat down, not bowing. He simply sat there, with his eyes straight and calm. And then something unexpected happened. From a hidden corner near the stage, an elderly man, Mr. Walter Kensington, 70 years old, a veteran businessman in the charity industry who has accompanied many projects to help homeless children, stood up. With silver hair, a simple but neat suit, he clapped his hands. The applause was loud, strong, and determined. Not a polite applause, not a clap to fill the void. It was a clap from the heart of a man who had witnessed many injustices, but had never seen anyone dare to stand up like Barron did. For the first few seconds, the room was silent. Then another round of applause rang out from the back row. A silver-haired lady, Dorothy Winston, 68, who had spent half her life caring for orphans, stood up, her eyes wet with tears, and clapped along. Then a third, a fourth. Soon, the entire hall seemed to wake up from its trance. The applause resounded, spreading throughout the space, growing louder and stronger, like a wave following another, turning into a long, thunderous applause. Someone cried, someone nodded emotionally, some stood up, looking at Barron with respect. Those eyes no longer saw him as the son of a former president, no longer as the image of the boy who lived in the Golden Tower. They were seeing a person, a young man who knew how to fight for dignity, who knew how to say kind words in the midst of cruel jokes. Karen Ellsworth lowered her eyes now. She clasped her hands together, trembling slightly, her lips pursed as if trying to hold back tears. No one needed to say a word to realize that she knew she had done wrong. At the front table, David Harrington, who had invited Barron to the gala, quietly wiped his red eyes. In his many years of charity work, he had seen many things: hungry children crying, single mothers struggling to feed their children, poor elderly people waiting for free meals. But he had never imagined that a child growing up in the spotlight, amid political controversy, could suffer such invisible wounds. And then an unexpected moment came. Karen Ellsworth walked slowly toward Barron. The room held its breath. When she stood before Barron, she bowed slightly, extending her hand. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice trembling but sincere. "Not because of who you are, but because of what you taught me and all of us about respect, which I should have remembered better than anyone else." Barron shook her hand, his eyes softening, and he nodded. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for standing up and saying that." Another round of applause rang out, this one warmer and more sympathetic than the last. As the final applause died down in the lavish ballroom and admiring glances lingered on Barron Trump, no one in the room knew that this moment would extend far beyond the gilded walls of the Ritz-Carlton. Just hours after the gala, when most of the guests had left, when the tables had been cleared, social media began to stir. A video of Barron standing up to Karen Ellsworth, speaking kindly but firmly, was captured by a guest and posted to Twitter. The first tweet: "Never seen anyone as gracious and composed as Barron Trump tonight. A lesson in dignity and forgiveness. Respect, Barron Trump." Within 30 minutes, the status had been shared thousands of times, and then the video spread like wildfire to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. National TV channels also replayed the video the next morning as a beautiful message in an era where bad news and angry stories seemed to dominate. Good Morning America opened the next morning's newscast with Barron Trump standing on stage. On a night that seemed like it was all about long speeches and polite smiles, an 18-year-old boy stood up and taught us a lesson about how to treat each other like real people. Fox News, which is used to reporting political stories, devoted 10 minutes to analyzing Barron's attitude. No one expected that a boy who had been a private person, who rarely spoke in public, could stand up in front of hundreds of adults and talk about respect with such composure that the whole world fell silent and listened. But perhaps the most amazing thing was the reaction of the American people themselves. On Facebook, a single mother, Susan McCarthy, 52 years old, living in Ohio, wrote, "Tonight I sat watching a video of Barron Trump with my 14-year-old son. I want my son to learn how to stand up to hurtful words, but also learn to respond with kindness and courage. Thank you, Barron, for giving mothers like me a great lesson to teach our children." A veteran, Franklin Davis, 74 years old, living in Florida, also left a comment. "It's been a long time since I've seen a young person who can face an insult without saying the same harsh words back. This kid has a spirit of steel. That's what our society needs right now." Conversations started happening everywhere. In Sunday morning church, when the pastor preaches on the power of words, he uses Barron as an example. When you're offended, what do? Do you respond with mean words, or do you choose to be silent and remind people to be kind? Like young Barron Trump did, when a whole crowd jeered him. In schools, many teachers have played the video in class for students to discuss. Mary Ann Benson, 58, a high school literature teacher in Texas, told the New York Times, "I showed my students the moment when Barron was confronted with the taunt, and I asked them, 'What would you do if you were being mocked?' And one student said, 'I would try to be like Barron, not get angry, but keep my respect for myself.' That's something I couldn't teach without that moment." Even those who once disliked the Trump family admitted to admiring Barron. One prominent opposition commentator, Rachel Gomez, tweeted, "We may not agree with Barron Trump's father, but last night Barron showed us that kindness transcends prejudice. A young man I admire." Barron's story goes beyond a charity gala. It becomes a reminder for today's society about how we treat each other. In a world where social media is full of toxic comments, pointless criticism, and offensive jokes, Barron's calm and kindness shines a light on a truth that everyone forgets. Behind every name, behind every image, is a person with a broken heart. And that lesson spreads quickly. Words can hurt, but they can also heal. Respect doesn't have to be demanded, it has to be given. Choosing kindness when you have the choice to be mean, that is true power. What if we all stood up like Barron, not to seek revenge, but to remind each other that kindness is never out of fashion? In a world of shouting and arguing, can we choose to speak in a way that heals? The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the soaring windows of the Ritz-Carlton, the story of Barron Trump dominated the morning news across America. The images of the young man standing before the crowd, calm, humble, but strong, resonated more powerfully than any political statement, not just because of the name Trump, but because of what Barron had shown: courage, maturity, and kindness that transcended all prejudice. But perhaps the most unexpected thing came from Karen Ellsworth, who had accidentally made sarcastic comments about him during the gala. Just hours after excerpts of Barron's response went viral, Karen appeared in a short video posted on her own Twitter account. With no longer the proud appearance of a sharp writer, but a thoughtful woman, her eyes red, Karen looked straight into the camera. "I want to send my deepest apologies to Barron Trump, to his family, and to everyone who listened to the story yesterday." She took a deep breath, as if to control her emotions. "I was wrong. I thought my jokes would be considered political humor, as I have done many times. But last night, Barron made me realize that sometimes in life, we forget that we are talking about real people, with hearts, with feelings, with pain." She paused, her eyes welling up with tears. "Barron, I learned something from you that adults like me should have known a long time ago. Respect is something that should never be forgotten, no matter the circumstances. Thank you for responding, not with anger, but with a lesson in kindness. I'm sorry." The video was immediately shared widely. The The comments under Karen's post were filled with mixed emotions, some sympathetic, some critical, but most of all, many realized that this was a rare moment when our society, so divided, learned to listen and forgive. Adults listening to young people. On evening talk shows, programs watched by millions of older Americans every night, like 60 Minutes, The View, or Anderson Cooper 360, commentators began to talk about Barron as a new symbol of the love generation. Anderson Cooper, known for his sharp and sometimes caustic style, offered an emotional commentary. We often judge the younger generation. We say they're weak, fragile, vulnerable. But last night, an 18-year-old boy taught the adult world, resilience isn't about being loud. It's about keeping your heart calm in the midst of storms. He continued, his eyes still, and I think we, as adults, should start listening to young people like him. What do communities and families say? In small towns across America, from coffee shops to church services, the story of Barron and Karen has become a major topic. Marjorie Wilson, 62, Iowa, a grandmother of 5, shared on a local radio show, "I cried when I saw the video. I thought of my grandchildren. I always taught them to be kind, and yesterday I realized that we adults sometimes forget that." What did the Trump family say? Donald Trump, although not appearing publicly at the event, took to Twitter to write a short but emotional message. "Proud of Barron. You showed the world that honor and kindness always win. Parents could not ask for more from their children." Melania Trump, who is known for protecting her son from the media, quietly posted a photo of Barron reading a book, with the caption, "My son, my pride. My son, my pride." Lessons for modern society. No one could have guessed that, in a noisy world with endless political arguments, social media, and vicious attacks, an 18-year-old boy would teach us a lesson about being human. While Karen Ellsworth, a sharp writer, had to learn the lesson of kindness all over again, Barron taught American society that respect is not a privilege, but a basic human right. That standing up for yourself does not necessarily mean screaming, but sometimes just speaking loud enough for others to listen. That whether your last name is Trump or any other, in the end, your heart hurts just like anyone else's. After an emotional gala night where Barron Trump silenced the whole room with his calm and profound words, the whole of America seemed to enter a common conversation that few expected. On television, on social media, and even at family gatherings, questions are starting to arise. When was the last time we stopped to truly respect each other, regardless of our differences? Have we forgotten how to have a decent conversation in the midst of political and personal arguments? In a small corner of Wichita, Kansas, at a family coffee shop, Margaret Jenkins, 67, a widow and former teacher, shared in an interview with a local news station. "I watched that video with my grandchildren, and for the first time, I saw the kids sitting quietly listening. When Barron talked about respect, I realized that, in our families, we need to relearn that too. We easily forget that kids are looking at how adults behave." Margaret sat quietly, her voice filled with emotion. "I've taught American literature all my life. I've taught about tolerance in characters like Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird. But that night, Barron gave me a lesson that I've never seen so vividly. A little boy, standing up in front of a powerful crowd, just to say, 'Remember that I'm human.' That moved me." Not only celebrities, but ordinary people, from small towns to big cities, expressed their admiration. George Mitchell, 72, a former soldier from Ohio, wrote on a veterans forum, "When I was younger, I learned to keep my cool in the face of humiliation. But, honestly, if someone targeted my family like that, I'm not sure I would be able to keep it like Barron. He shows us that true strength is knowing how to restrain, to maintain dignity. Dignity that I think modern society is losing." A university professor, Carol Martinez, 58, also spoke out at a conference on media ethics. "What happened at the gala shows a painful thing. Our society is easy to attack, to judge, especially young people. But the way Barron responded is a lesson for all generations, including people like us, lecturers, teachers, parents. Listen, understand before judging." National television shows like The Today Show, CBS Sunday Morning, and Fox and Friends all devoted special time to the moment. A veteran NBC reporter who has covered political events for 30 years said on air, "I've seen a lot of confrontational statements, but Barron Trump shows us that you don't have to shout to be heard. Silence sometimes speaks louder than 1,000 words." Young people are thinking too. Surprisingly, videos from the gala spread to high schools and colleges. A Texas classroom where students were required to watch videos of Barron's speech and discussion recorded the surprising reactions. Emma, 16, told the class, her voice shaking, "We go online every day and see people talking badly about each other, throwing rocks at each other, especially famous people. But Barron reminds me, whether they're famous or not, they're still people. I feel ashamed because sometimes I laugh at mean jokes about other people. I don't think I'll do that anymore." Another student, Brandon, 17, added, "It's crazy that a kid who's almost our age would stand up for himself without yelling, without getting angry. I think sometimes I need to learn to stand up for myself." After the first days, many politicians, regardless of party, expressed support for Barron. A veteran senator said, "I disagree with his father on a lot of policies, but I respect the way Barron keeps his dignity. He's taught us all a lesson about how to treat others." A prominent journalist who has criticized the Trump family admitted in an interview, "I've criticized Trump many times, but that night, little Barron made me think again about the way we attack people so unreasonably. A boy who didn't choose to be famous, but was dragged into the political game, and he responded with a maturity that I'm not sure I had at that age." From a gala, that story became a symbol of a national discussion about seemingly simple things: respect, empathy, and kindness. Americans, from small neighborhoods to universities, from young people to those who have lived through entire wars, stopped to ask, how can we talk about each other with more respect? How long has it been since we stopped to ask the person in front of us how they feel? Has this era made us forget how to treat each other as human beings? In an America divided by politics, prejudice, and disagreement, the image of Barron Trump standing still, holding his head high, and talking about respect is a reminder we all need to hear. A reminder that respect is unconditional, compassion is not reserved for a few, and that each of us, young and old, can be a beacon of kindness. As the gala lights dimmed, the tables cleared, and the guests returned to their daily lives, the echoes of Barron Trump standing up to ridicule still echoed across America. But what people remember about that night were not the sarcastic words that were uttered, but the calm, courageous response of a young man whose words were more powerful than any loud protest. Perhaps no one expected that just a calm answer, without anger or harshness, could move souls that seemed to have become numb to political debates. When Barron said, "Behind the stories, behind the jokes, are real people, with feelings, with dreams and wounds," I hope what I said today will make people stop and think about that. The whole room was silent, and strangely, no one felt insulted by those words. On the contrary, people realized that sometimes the truth is told not to criticize, but to heal. Barron's story has broken many boundaries that society is facing today. The boundary of divisive politics, the boundary of prejudice against the younger generation, and the boundary between fame and human dignity. Because when an 18-year-old boy, born into the spotlight and the gossip, can stand up and talk about kindness, none of us can use that as an excuse to continue judging others without cause. In just 1 week after the incident, more than 50 schools in the U.S. held discussions on manners and the power of words. Parents started talking to their kids about respect and kindness through Barron's story. Television shows, from CNN to Fox News, took a break from political debates to talk about something simple: how to treat each other better. The story sends a powerful message that society needs today. In a world where anger, judgment, and hurt can flare up with just a word, it is kind, calm, and compassionate words that can heal. No need to be a celebrity, no need to be a politician. Each of us, from children to the elderly, can choose to respond with kindness and respect. And sometimes, young people like Barron teach us adults lessons that we ourselves have forgotten. Immediately after the event, a number of publishers and educational organizations proposed organizing seminars on the topic, the right to respect. Miss Gloria Thompson, age 64, New York, a longtime social activist, said, "We have forgotten one thing. Every human being, regardless of background, status, deserves respect." Barron's story has reminded us of the dignity that society needs. The end of this story is not applause, but hearts that know how to move. Maybe in a few months the media will forget. Maybe other news will fill the nightly news. But for those who witnessed and listened, the image of a calm Barron Trump in the middle of that powerful room will be an unforgettable memory. Perhaps after hearing this story, each of us will ask ourselves, have I ever said something that hurt someone without realizing it? Do I dare to choose calmness and kindness instead of responding with anger? Life is too short for us to continue hurting each other with words. As Barron has shown us, just one kind word can change a room and even a society. If this story touches your heart, leave a comment below sharing your thoughts on respect in today's society. Please spread this story so that someone who may need a little kindness will receive it. Words can hurt, but they can also be medicine to heal. And every day, each of us has the right to choose. If this lesson touches your heart, leave a comment to share your feelings. Have you ever had a similar moment? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to continue listening to meaningful real-life stories, life lessons that everyone needs to remember. Let's spread kindness together, starting with the words we choose today.